Now I want to introduce 3 New York City educators to you. Stephen Numme, Michelle Singleton, and Abby Lovett are doing outstanding work in very different ways in city schools, in a District 75 classroom, as a school leader, and as a director of student services for special education in a network. They have an important aspect of their own K-12 schooling experience in common, but I'll let them share those stories themselves. So I have a series of 4 questions, and I'm going to ask them in turn. The people will answer either in order or not, depending on how they feel like it. And then at a certain point, perhaps it'll go off script, and they'll end up talking to each other. And there might even be time for someone in the audience to ask a question. So we'll see how this goes. It's not very formal, and it's not rehearsed, and nobody wrote a speech, and nobody told them what to say. So this is authentic talk where who knows what might get said. So number 1, please introduce yourself, tell us your current job, how long you've been in education, and the various roles you've held.
All right, I guess I'll go first. My name is Stephen Numme. I am a teacher in a self-contained classroom in South Bronx. I work with a size 7 population, also known as emotional disturbance. I work with students in a 12-on-1 setting. I have roughly a decade of experience combined in the city schools and also in Stamford, Connecticut. I've held positions as a high school English teacher, working with 9th and 11th graders. I've also served as a school counselor at John F. Kennedy High School in the Bronx for 3 years. In addition, I provided homebound instruction for a year, and I have also worked in self-contained settings in the Bronx, P188X to be exact. I'm not sure if anybody here is familiar with the school, but there we go. Fantastic. That's where I work.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Singleton, and I am the Director of Student Services for Special Education. I have been in education for 21 years. I started as a para, so I was excited to see so many paras in the audience. From a para, I became a teacher. I taught grades, throughout my teaching career, I taught grades K to 8. I was also a teacher leader, a teacher mentor, a staff developer in the middle school, and I was also a reading coach for the district. I was an instructional support specialist for special education, and I was the operations manager at the Queens ISC, and now I am the Director of Student Services for Special Education.
I'm Abby Lovett, and I'm currently the assistant principal at a high school in the South Bronx called Bronx Design and Construction Academy. I've been in education for about 13 years, and my start was in an education service district in Eugene, Oregon, actually. And then I spent 2 years there and then joined Teach for America, and then started teaching. Sorry, I was just waiting for some response, but I taught for about 8 years, was an IEP teacher, middle school, self-contained 12-1-1. I worked for the network for about 1.5 years, and then I had the opportunity to join a new school project, which was opening BDCA. We currently are in the Alfred E. Smith campus, and we refurbished their shops and kind of reinvigorated the CTE trades, so our school offers the construction trades and architecture, and that's what I'm doing now.
Okay, so number 2. Tell us your formal or informal education that prepared you to be an inclusive educator, and share with us a success you had this year that relates to inclusive education.
I guess I'll field that one first again. Formally, to help prepare me for this opportunity, I've obviously gone through college. I was one of Celia's students here at TC for my graduate level work. Informally, I could relate very well with my students, as I was once what you would refer to as a size 7. Had very similar childhood experiences growing up to many of my students. I'll spare you the sob stories. They're generally not very good, no father around. A hard-working mom for the most part, always there, pretty much the only one to provide me with support. My success pretty much is an extension of my students' success. I've had the opportunity to help move 4 of my students into inclusion-bound programs for high school. And in addition, 2 of my students who had one-to-one crisis paraprofessionals no longer do. In addition to that, I've also had an 811 student who's been working with me over the course of the past 6 months, who's going to be LRE'd, and will now have a 1211 setting for her moving into high school. So those are just a few of my successes that I've had this year working with my population.
Hi again, back. No. So what really connected me to education was I was one of those students where, I felt that the administrators and the teachers really didn't understand me. So I consider it to be misunderstood minds. And growing up, by the time I got to middle school, I was suspended 13 times. I was kicked out of 4 high schools. And my mother had to actually advocate for me to get me back, because by this time they didn't even want me attending the New York City public schools. They actually wanted to send me to a 600 school. And so my mom, she had to fight to get me back into school. But a lot of my misbehaviors was because I was actually bored in class. And so I wanted to make it fun. So I would do silly things, like when the teacher turned her back, I would open up the window, maybe throw a snowball, just doing silly things. But there was a few teachers actually that, and an AP, that actually, took time to talk with me. Sometimes they would meet me and ask me how my day was going, and they would actually talk to me about what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, and another teacher would actually use me in a leadership capacity. And I think I heard one of the young ladies said that they had a child in their class that was, causing a lot of havoc in there. And so, being on the peer mediation, that student was able to turn around his behavior because the teacher started using him in a leadership capacity. And so that's what brought me into education, because I wanted to actually work with students who most teachers or most educators would consider to be very challenging. Those students that make you say, he's here today. So actually when I started teaching, I used to say, give them to me. And it was just so amazing to see the progress, the way they turned around their behavior. And even in life now, I keep in contact with so many of them. And so teaching is near and dear to my heart. And so one of the things that we do in our network, which is how I met Celia, was I work with 30 schools. So each one of my schools had to participate in one of the projects. And then what we did was we developed lab sites where we would go and we would visit the other teacher in practice, and we would have cool and warm feedback so that they're growing. We're growing as administrators, and then the children are actually benefiting from it, because now we're able to implement those strategies that they need in order to be able to exceed and excel academically, because that's why we're all here, because that's what we want for them. And so I say this year, one of the things we noticed, because we tried to continue that and keep our partnership going with Teachers College for the TCIP program, is we noticed that we actually reduced the referral rate to special education. We increased the decertification rate to special education. And many of our children are actually performing really, really well. When we looked at the data last year for the Common Core, many of our students actually scored 3s and 4s. And so, again, that comes from teachers learning from each other. We include our paras. When I leave here today, I'm going to conduct a para PD. And so we make sure our paras are trained, and, we'll make sure that we're working with teachers and that they have the opportunity to see best practices.
I did not realize that there's basically a 1211 crew sitting up here, because my story is very similar. I was in special ed when I was in 2nd grade for reading, the pigeons and eagles group kind of thing, where you're a pigeon and you're not reading on grade level. as the other group's called the Eagles. So, real awkward. Because kids know, right? You guys know.
Yep.
So, I went to school in Portland, Oregon, and I think I was really lucky because Portland has a very inclusive model and way of looking at education, or did. Now Portland's kind of in trouble. So I was pulled out of class, and because I missed a lot of core classes as I moved up into 4th and 5th grade, I started acting out. So when I got to middle school, what my classrooms looked like were more like a 12 to 1-to-1 setting. And it wasn't for the whole day, so I was there. I was in communications classes, which were supposed to teach us how to communicate with each other. But you know, like everyone in my class in 6th grade was smoking cigarettes and skipping school. So I don't know what we were communicating. It was pretty dangerous. And then when I was in 7th grade, my core ELA teacher, because by then I had, I was close enough to grade level, I was reading and I could participate in the ELA class. She started a mentorship reading program with an elementary school that was really near our middle school. And she essentially, I mean, through working with me and just seeing my behaviors, kind of like Michelle, knew that I really needed to be motivated, and there was leadership capacity within me. It just wasn't being activated. I was really bored. I was misplaced into a class that I shouldn't be sitting in. And so I started learning how to be kind of a mentor to 4th and 5th graders, going to the school during my self-contained time, and starting reading groups. And then I was allowed to ask like 3 or 4 other kids to join, and she really coached me and helped me write my own lesson plans. Like, I mean, I was in 6th grade, 7th grade, but I was able to just establish and start developing a sense of autonomy, which is super powerful because I became in control of the decisions and the types of things that I was doing. So went through high school, was in regular ed classes. I went to a CTE high school, which is why I'm so passionate about the CTE high school I run. I was an architecture and automotive major. That was really helpful. And through high school, I had a lot more leadership opportunities and became student body vice president and really felt more motivated, and ever since then have kind of just been moving forward. But I wonder if the 3 of us were in a class one day, what might have happened. I also had some suspensions and other things. But anyways, the way I see inclusion working in my school right now, I mean, we have our decertification rates are great. I mean, we're only 9th, 10th, and 11th grade right now because we're rolling up. But we have 13 kids with IEPs in 11th grade, 45 in 10th grade, and 65 to 70 in 9th grade. So you can see that as they move up, they become independent. And I think that that's a really great feeling. That's it.
Okay, thank you. So I had heard each 3 of them talk about their school experiences over the years, and I kept notes. And so when it came time to figuring out what would be a good panel for today, I went back to that note and went back to the 3 of them and thought, you know, they're going to have such an interesting conversation among themselves, and then with you all, that I'm glad that we're getting down into it. So is there anything that you had in your own personal experience that you've started to talk about that informs your commitments now? I think in some ways all 3 of you have mentioned it in general, but if you want to drill down a little bit more and talk about what your commitments are and where those come from.
Yeah, when I heard Abby and Michelle speaking, I was just reminded of some of my own experiences growing up. It's funny they had the Eagles and the Pigeons. Well, actually, it was not very funny. We had Eagles and the Beagles. That's why I thought it was funny. And in 1st grade, I was an Eagle, and I was actually a pretty eager reader. And try to make that rhyme, by the way, but whatever. So, and I got upset one time because we all had a paragraph to read, and my paragraph happened to be 1 sentence. And even though I knew that a paragraph could actually be a sentence, at the age of 5 or 6, I forgot what I was at the time, I had a fit, you know. and I was moved to the Beagles. So I was no longer allowed to read anymore, and I had to just copy notes off the board, words that I already knew. So that was like my first, informal experience with being excluded, and it was directly attributable to my behaviors. I'm without a doubt an ADHD kid. I was with your prototypical Ritalin kid from the 80s. And I went to a parochial school for my first 5 years, so they had a very funny perspective on how to deal with kids like me. I won't get into their, to the reasoning, but let's just say there was a cultural disconnect. And I think, generally speaking, that tends to overarch into the public schools and what many of you see today. A lot of the times, it's not a kid's aptitude or ability to learn. It's their behaviors or whatever they're presenting that creates this cultural disconnect within that institution, and that's generally where the problems begin. And for me, it was a very real problem. I was kicked out of a lot of schools. I went to about 7 high schools, 6 or 7. I dropped out of school in 9th grade, and a lot of my friends that I did hang out with, they're not here today. So having had the experience of kind of delving off the right path, if you will, and experiencing the pitfalls of exclusive practices, or if you want to call it giving up on a kid, or a kid just getting kind of tired and fed up with the system, kind of informed my own perspectives and beliefs when I had the opportunity to really affect change. And it was just shortly after I began studying at Bronx Community College that I had the opportunity to pursue a degree in education. And I clearly remember the Gandhi quote, that spoke to something to the effect of being the change you want to see in the world. I'm sure many of you heard different variations of that over the years. So I had an opportunity to just really reflect on that and act on it. And it just kind of brought me to where I'm at today, in the presence of some very remarkable and awesome people. So that's how I got here.
And for me, education has always been near and dear to my heart. Because for me, if my mom had given up on me, or if the teacher or the AP or public advocate had given up on me, I wouldn't be sitting here today. And so it was actually a public advocate in the community that actually recommended me to become a paraprofessional, because I was doing so much work, like in a Boys and Girls Club, putting things together and working with kids. And so when she recommended me to become a paraprofessional, and they told me that I would be working with children who had challenging behavior, because back then they used to coin the classes, Ms. 1, Ms. 2, Ms. 3. So they were placing me in the Ms. 2 class, which was a classroom that was filled with little boys that had some behavioral problems. And then it was there that I worked closely with the teacher. The teacher took me under her wings, and we started to implement a lot of activities. So instead of our activities being, just dry and, copy this from the board or read this or complete that, we actually started turning them into actual activities where the children could actually work in groups to complete tasks. And this is back then when you actually sat in rows. We started putting on shows, allowing the kids to actually act out, the reading lessons, just to help them, let's say, remember. Most of the kids, though, that were in the Ms. 2 class, actually academically could do really well. Like Stephen said, he was one of those great readers. So it was just a matter of teaching them, great strategies when it comes to feeling impulsive or aggressive. And a lot of times, as educators, if a child struggles with reading, we put systems in place to teach that child how to read. Or if they're struggling in math, we put systems in place to teach that child, whether we pick them up, whether we work with them in small groups, whether we partner them with a buddy. But when it comes to discipline, there's like a different outlook on it. It's almost like, where's the dean? Where's the principal? Right? And so how do we put systems in place to teach them how to behave? How do we have those small group instructions or to teach them those strategies. Because once we teach them those strategies, how to channel that anger or how to deal with being impulsive, you know, it helps them, it helps the other children in the classroom, and it helps us as educators, right? Because now we're able to do what we love, and that's teach. And so that's why education was near and dear to my heart. And it's something that, you know, I'm going to retire in because I love it so much. And I'm just so glad to see all of you here, because that means that these children in New York City have a chance.
Yeah. So on point. So on point. Earlier, Corinne said, and I didn't know that Carmen says that the answer's in the room. I'm glad you repeated that a couple times, because now I'm going to use it. I think it's true in our classrooms. Like, I don't think we leverage the capacity of our own students enough to carry the work forward for us, because we shouldn't be stressed out overworking ourselves. They have all of the answers, right? They have the answers for what's going to make inclusion work in your building. They have the answers for what it means and what it sounds like to get some of the things that Michelle was talking about. And I'm just to summarize kind of what we've all been talking about, there are some through lines, which are, we've all talked about relationships or culture that we had with someone, right? Which is really, really important, and everyone here knows that, which is why you're all here. We've all talked to some degree about autonomy, either feeling autonomous ourselves or being able to promote that. And we've also talked about like someone finally setting like a rigorous expectation for us, that we were able to rise to some type of a challenge, whether it be peer mediation, whether it be mentoring through to finally get to college. And I think those three things are really important for students. They're also really important for adults. And so if leaders are making sure that their teachers and paras and everyone working within their building feel those three things, and we as teachers and educators are making sure that our students feel those things, I think you can really start to get some good work done.
Thanks. So last question. What advice do you each have for teachers, paraprofessionals, and school leaders to facilitate the greatest possible access, participation, and equity for students?
I'm a quote guy. I try to pick some of the more potent quotes and abide by them, or at least use them to drive my practices. And I think the village raising the child is very appropriate with regard to educating our students, any student, regardless of their placement, their social location, if you will. Collaborations. I mean, it's like the big buzzword in education these days, and a lot of people talk about it, but is it really being experienced in the classroom, I think is the real question. So, I mean, my advice would really just be echoing the sentiments of just the great teachers and educators that you've seen and experienced, and just analyzing the work that they've done. I mean, I've grown tremendously over the course of my short career just by being mindful of best practices and, again, another one of those key buzz terms, right? But, you know, what works, right? You know, what works? I think we need to really take a look at that. So, you know, in light of, you know, the village raising the child, you know, you have to incorporate your paraprofessionals. I mean, I work very closely with mine. I do my best to identify their strengths and their comforts and exploit that, you know, for the betterment of the kids and their education. For example, if I have a paraprofessional who's very strong in mathematics, well, that's great. You could help support me while I'm teaching my class, or you could work, you know, maybe even teach your own lesson if this is something that you feel very strongly about. You're strong and skilled in. Working very closely with related service providers, whether it be counselors, occupational therapists, whoever it may be, to just, you know, help kids out, you know, just really help them out. Parents, you know, parents are important. Sometimes they're not accessible. Sometimes our kids, you know, are, you know, custody of the state, but, you know, whoever their guardian is, to establish, you know, a very positive, ongoing relationship with them, I think would be very, very beneficial to both you and the kid. Because I always like to pluck that out of my back pocket. You know, like for instance, with my little friend Angel, I say, Angel, listen, you know, I see how you work with your little brother, and your mom really relies on you a lot. and says, you got to make a good choice here, man, how would your brother feel if he saw you, doing this? And, it's psychological, but it works, whatever you could do. I mean, sometimes you got to get desperate and just pluck things like that out of the bag of tricks, if you will, but that's what I do, and reflecting, just being a reflective practitioner and, just always adhering to like a capacity-oriented approach to teaching kids. Just presume competence, Understand that they have some skills and that your job is to build on their foundation. And, we're not all Joe Clark, or we're not all going to create, big change in a day. But if you can influence the kid to, develop some better practices, I trust in time, the village will help continue to raise that child, even if it is just within the school.
And so what has helped me become successful in my work in education is 3 things that I'm going to give to you. And one of them is to know your students. Know your students in many different ways. Know your students academically, because then you know how you can really support them. Know your students socially, because if they need that social support, then that's the opportunity for you to be able to teach them how to behave socially appropriately. Right? Know your students personally. And this is near and dear to me because I had a student in 3rd grade, and when I came out of work, I actually saw the student at the gas station, and he was pumping gas. And so I wondered to myself, I said, why is his mom letting him pump gas, at such a young age, in 3rd grade? But then a car gave him something and drove off. Then another car pulled up, and he started pumping the gas again. And so I went over to him, and I said to him, Darren, why are you at the gas station pumping gas? And he said to me, because I'm trying to earn enough money so I can buy some bread and meat to make a sandwich for me and my mom. Right? That gave me a different perspective, because not only was he a behavior problem, but it helped me to understand that if he's hungry, it's hard for him to focus on what I'm teaching, right? So that's what I mean by know your students personally, because then there are things that you can do as an educator to help them. The other thing is to know your colleagues, right? Because there's so much talent in our building, right? You might have someone who's great at art, in the arts, whether it's dance, whether it's drawing. And by knowing that, you can tap in on that resources to bring your curriculum to life for those students. Because in our classrooms, we have tactile learners, we have kinesthetic learners, we have visual learners, we have auditory learners, and every lesson should be able to tap into every modality, so that we're reaching and teaching all children in our classrooms. And then the last one is near and dear to me, right? So sometimes as teachers, we're stressed, we're doing so many things because at the end of the day, everything is on us, right? And so sometimes we think that we can go into a classroom because we have the lesson up here and we know our students, and then we say, okay, I'm going to put this lesson together. But we can't wing it. So for a great lesson, we really need to plan. And so one of the things that I was raised on was 6 P's. Prior proper planning prevents poor performance. And I use that in every facet of my life. And so that's something that I feel would really help you all out in the classroom, because at the end of the day, you're all excellent teachers. And the children, like I said, they're blessed to have you. And so our job, right, is to learn from each other and to be there for each other so that we can be there for the children.
I don't have a lot to add after that. It's pretty good.
You don't have to.
Yeah, I would just say that inclusion is a feeling, right? We know what it feels like to be included, whether it be in our family groups, our friend groups. So let that marinate next time you feel included, and think about, like, what does this sound like? What does this feel like? What does it look like to be included? And those are the types of things that we need to start teaching and rolling out and modeling in our classrooms so that it feels that way in our classroom or it feels that way in our school.
Yeah, thank you.